All rise. What's up? Here we go. Judicial branch. A lot of people get confused about the judicial branch. Not a lot of people know what it is, what it does, how it operates, what's the whole deal with it. And hopefully today I shed some light on it. So today's topic, judicial branch, Supreme Court. Inquiry question. How does the Supreme Court use judicial review to interpret the Constitution? Word of the day, interpret, to explain the meaning of information, words, or actions. Okay? This is the Supreme Court. I know they all kind of look like the same building. If you saw this, you're like, that's the White House, right? Or if you saw this, that's the Capitol building. They all look the same. That's because they borrow from this neoclassical architecture. Basically, they wanted to borrow ideas from Greece and Rome because they saw that architecture as an authority, a source of authority. So by making our buildings have this Greco-Roman architecture, neoclassical vibe to it, we're basically saying like we're part of that tradition. We're part of that democratic tradition. So if you ever wonder why some of our buildings look like these shrines you would see in Rome and Greece, that is basically why. Okay, a little architecture for you this morning. Okay, here we go. So judicial branch, we got 9 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got 6 dudes, 3 women. A little review. We talked about the federal government has 3 branches. Executive branch is the president, vice president, the cabinet, many others. The legislative branch is called the Congress. It is bicameral. Legislature with 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Lastly, and today, we're going to talk about the judicial branch, which we will call the Supreme Court, and I'll probably abbreviate SC. You can abbreviate SC as well. The judicial branch also includes lower federal courts. So your first activity today is to find out the names of all these people and write them down, okay? Now, this should be easy because you hopefully have a machine that has the stored knowledge of the entire human species, so that should be easy. But if you want even easier, you can go to the end of this whole thing, and I have their names right here, so if you want to cheat. It also asks you who the Chief Justice is. So the Chief Justice is the person who is in charge, the head dude, all right, head dude in charge, and that would be this man right here. His name is Chief Justice John Roberts. Okay, so he's in charge. Well, I don't really want to say he's in charge because they're all equal, but he is. He's the guy. I don't know how else to put it. He's the guy. Okay, and during President Trump's impeachment trial, if it did get to the Senate, he would have been the presiding law officer over the impeachment trial. So John Roberts would have been the Supreme Court guy to look over the trial. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at the Supreme Court real quick. So here's the Constitution. One thing you notice about the Constitution is that it has a lot of words. Okay, we looked at this in detail. We the people. Each article has different powers that it gives to different branches. For example, Article 1 gives powers to the executive branch. I'm sorry, legislative branch. Article 2 gives power to the executive branch. Article 3, very short article, gives power to the Supreme Court. In total, there are 7 articles. Here's Article 1. And on top of the articles, there are additions to the Constitution. They're the 27 amendments. We started off with 10, right? We call them the Bill of Rights. You probably know the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right to petition for redress of grievances. I'm going to be talking more about the Bill of Rights in probably the coming week, maybe next week. And just off the top of my head, because I Googled it, there are 4,543 words to be exact in the Constitution. So that's a lot of words. They're written in 1789. So every law, we'll go back to that in a minute. All right. So when the government does something, whether it be a law or an action, it has to fall in line with the Constitution because the Constitution was written as a framework to how our government will work. And anything that is outside of that framework, it doesn't work. It doesn't. We don't want it to be part of our government because the framers, the people who laid down the framework, which is the Constitution, were very specific and very particular about what they wanted included in our government. So if in 100, 200 years the government starts to change things and alter the way our constitution was set up, then they need a group of people to say, no, can't do that. And that's what we'll get to today. So every law or action falls into two categories: constitutional, which meaning the law or action will be allowed to happen because the Constitution allows it, meaning so whatever law, like we studied HR 6201, which was the coronavirus relief, if nothing in that law goes against the Constitution, then it's considered constitutional. Let's say in HR 6201, I think, there was a part that said, oh, and by the way, we're going to take all of your guns away. Okay. That would go against the Constitution, it would go against the Second Amendment. And it would be considered unconstitutional. Okay. Meaning the law or action will not be allowed to happen because the Constitution doesn't allow it. So if you added something to say, okay, because of coronavirus, we being the government, are now allowed to take our soldiers and they're now allowed to come to your door in the middle of the night and they are allowed to stay in your beds and you have to house them and you have to feed them, that would be unconstitutional because it goes against the Third Amendment, which was, if you remember, the Third Amendment is like the anti-quartering act, meaning that in no times of peace or war do we have to quarter soldiers. Thank God for that one. Okay, so the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, their main job is interpreting whether a law or action is constitutional or not. So they look at, the Supreme Court looks at everything coming out of the legislative branch, so all the laws that they're passing, and they make sure that there's nothing in the law or hidden in the law that would go against what the Constitution wants or what the Constitution, the framework that the Constitution is. And same thing with the executive branch. They make sure that executive actions, so we're talking about laws and actions, if the president, let's say, signs an executive action saying that now police officers, because of coronavirus, are allowed to search every car, no matter what. It could be, no matter what, that would go against the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court would strike it down. Okay. Just a little thought question. Why do you think there are 9 Supreme Court justices instead of 10 or 8? And I'll give you a little hint if you're watching this. It's because 9 is an odd number. That's your hint. Okay. The official name for this check or power of the Supreme Court is judicial review. So their ability to say if something is constitutional or unconstitutional, we call judicial review. Ironically, judicial review was not given to the Supreme Court in the Constitution. Technically, the Supreme Court gave themselves this power in the case Marbury v. Madison in 1803. Okay, the next part, you're going to watch this video, this YouTube video about Marbury v. Madison. I'm going to warn you, Marbury v. Madison is not the easiest thing to understand, but I would say sometimes when we were back in school, back in class, I'd say, the thing you need to know, the thing that will be on the test, the thing that will be on Castle Learning, is that Marbury versus Madison led to the Supreme Court getting the power of judicial review. That is the most important thing about Marbury versus Madison. When you take your U.S. history regents in 11th grade and there's a Marbury versus Madison question on it, the answer is judicial review. Okay? How it happened, how that came about is what's in this YouTube video here. So you're going to watch a YouTube video, and then there are questions. Here's your answer sheet. Okay. There are questions. So just a comprehension question. Who appointed William Marbury to the Supreme Court? John Adams. Okay. What was the political ideology of William Marbury? Federalist. 5. What was the Judiciary Act of 1789? That's important. You figure that one out yourself. And then this is a fill in the blank from something that was said in the video. Judicial Review defined the Supreme Court as equal to and independent of blank and the blank branch. Okay. So Marbury versus Madison is something that I will be honest with you. It took me a long time to really understand what was happening and this case. Okay, so just a little side note. Whenever you see like a name and then a verse and then another name or a state, or like it'll say Marbury versus the United States of America, Marbury versus New York, Marbury versus Madison, that is usually a court case. Okay, that's usually a court case. So whenever you see that, that is a court case. So it took me a long time to actually understand the nuances of Marbury versus Madison, and I really don't expect you guys to get it 100%. If you do, God bless, okay? Because it did take me probably not until college where I really understood the inner workings of why this case is so important. And as you'll see in the video, it's probably one of the most important court cases in our history. So if you want to be a lawyer or a judge one day, you'll probably learn more about it. Okay? All right. Let's go. As you saw in this video, so hopefully you pause the video and watch the video, the president has the power to appoint Supreme Court justices. So this is a power that the president has. He has the ability to say, okay, you're a Supreme Court justice. It's not as easy as that because once the president appoints a Supreme Court justice, the legislative branch, the Congress, has to confirm the appointment. That's part of checks and balances. So as you notice here, we have a bit of a split, okay? We have a liberal bloc, which liberal is a political ideology. Hopefully you remember that from when we did our liberal versus conservative, thing with the Post-its we put on the board. If I had my classroom, I'd be like, you don't remember that over there. And then you have the conservative bloc here. So these are people who have the conservative ideology. And although the justices are supposed to be impartial and unbiased, many times the president will pick a justice that shares their political ideology. For example, 2 justices were appointed by President Donald Trump already. And they are, of course, because Donald Trump is considered a conservative, although many people would argue that, okay, they would be considered conservative judges. For example, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. These are both Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump appointed within the last 3 years. Now, if Donald Trump is elected again, which is very possible, okay, there is a possibility that one of these liberal judges, specifically Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's holding on, she's very old, God bless her, okay, but remember, a Supreme Court justice serves for life. So they either die in office, like one of the Supreme Court justices, Antonin Scalia, who Gorsuch actually took over for. I think it's Gorsuch or Kavanaugh. Donald Trump would be able to appoint another conservative judge, which would tip the balance of the Supreme Court even more so towards conservative. So if you eliminated Ginsburg and then you added another Supreme Court justice, these are young men. These people, the Supreme Court, could be considered, let's say they've lived another 30-something years, the Supreme Court could be conservative for the next 30 years, like a 6-3 split. And that is what, conservatives would be totally happy about and liberals would be unhappy about. But it is a way of the president to leave a legacy, meaning their policies, their ideology will be, left over, which is in the video what John Adams was trying to do by appointing William Marbury at the last minute of his presidency, because he knew that Marbury was a Federalist and he wanted to maintain the Federalist legacy for years and years and years to come. And Thomas Jefferson was not having that because he was an anti-Federalist. He was a a Democratic Republican, so he tried to stop it, and that's what Marbury versus Madison is all about. But um, it's interesting to watch. So this is what's happening now, and I like Sotomayor. She's from the Bronx. I think she was the first Latin American Supreme Court justice and a female as well. She's a big Yankees fan. I once saw her at a Yankees game in, Aaron Judge's box with a Yankee. She had a Yankee robe on, and she was in there with, I'll try and find a picture of it, but I thought it was pretty cool. Okay, so guys, check this out. If you're having trouble with Marbury versus Madison and judicial review, you can watch this video. It explains it a bit more thoroughly. It is not required. So many people are like, okay. If you want to be a lawyer, judge, or social studies teacher, you should watch it. It is interesting, sort of, okay? But if you want a firmer grasp on Marbury versus Madison so that you can really, really impress your 11th grade social studies teacher when the time comes, or your history professor, you should watch it. And I know some of you will, okay? But it is not required. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I'm trying to make these a little shorter. And Thursday, I'm going to be doing, this is a VHS. I've seen one of these before. It's like a relic artifact. I'm doing stuff with that. Thursday, I'm going to do a live lesson, and we're going to talk about the Exit Project slideshow. So, cool. Thank you, guys. Adios.